Fetuses. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
Well, on this International Women's Day, we turn to the latest attempts by lawmakers in the United States to curb reproductive rights. On Wednesday, Virginia's Republican Governor Bob McDonnell signed into law a controversial bill forcing women seeking abortions to have an ultrasound. Meanwhile, state lawmakers in Georgia are considering a measure that would ban abortion after 20 weeks based on the highly contested notion that a fetus can feel pain at that stage. Critics say the bill could force women to carry fetuses with severe abnormalities.
Yesterday, Georgia's state Senate approved 2 additional bills related to reproductive rights. One would ban abortion coverage under the state employees' health care plan. Another says employees of private religious institutions have no right to demand that their insurance policies pay for contraceptives. 8 of Georgia's 9 women senators, the 8 women Democrats, walked out in protest as the bills passed. One of them was State Senator Nan Orak.
Marching, 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 and women are on the bullseye target.
Both reproductive health care bills were immediately sent to Georgia's Republican-controlled House. Meanwhile, New Hampshire's House passed a similar measure to exempt religious institutions from including contraceptive coverage in their insurance plans. All this follows Republican efforts at the national level to allow employers to opt out of birth control coverage on moral grounds, as outlined in the Blunt Amendment that was defeated last Thursday in the Democrat-controlled U.S. Senate. Well, to discuss these bills and the wider attacks against reproductive rights, we're joined from Atlanta, Georgia, by Loretta Ross, National Coordinator of the SisterSong Reproductive Justice Collective. Loretta, it's great to have you back again, especially on this International Working Women's Day. Talk about what happened in your own legislature in Georgia yesterday.
Well, in Georgia, we got tossed back to the 19th century, where the Republican legislators really didn't want to hear from women. They didn't want to pay attention and presumed that they could tell us what to do with our bodies again. And so the bills, first of all, reduce abortion access from 26 weeks to 20 weeks, which is a blow because it doesn't have exceptions for rape or incest or fetal abnormality like you talked about. And it really is sad that we are having legislators make medical decisions that should be between a woman and her doctor. And then they went even further by providing this exemption for religious institutions so that the employees, whether or not they're of that religion or not, no longer have the freedom with their own money to have health insurance that covers contraceptive access. And so in Georgia, we're feeling the blows of this war on women that's sweeping across the country. And the women legislators who walked out last night in protest really stood up for us. And there were some men in the legislature who stood up for us too, but to no avail because the bills passed and now we have to fight, fight, fight. And as a matter of fact, we're having a march on the state capitol on Monday to protest the silencing of women and this war on women. We're calling it Walk in Our Shoes because really they are not really paying attention to the situation that women are actually enduring.
And Loretta Ross, this effort by the Republicans in Georgia to basically resurrect and continue this fight that was already waged in Congress and now to begin to force these issues at the state level?
Yes, it is. It's an effort, of course, to strike a blow at Roe v. Wade because they want these things to percolate up to the federal level, giving them an opportunity to overturn Roe v. Wade. But they don't realize that, in fact, I think this is going to create a backlash against them because we have Republican and Democratic women who are outraged by this all-out assault on women's rights. And so it's really going to drive a wedge within their own ranks. I think it's a war between the moderate Republicans and the Tea Party Republicans that I think that they're going to regret. I think the presidential candidates are trying to do everything they can now to back off and not talk about this war that they started. And we're going to see, I think, come, the future, an aroused, angry, sleeping giant of American women who use contraception and don't want these mostly male legislators telling us what to do with our bodies.
Can you tell us your personal story, Loretta? You were one of the first African-American women to run a rape crisis center, and your own story in dealing with reproductive rights.
Well, I got into this movement because at 14 I became pregnant through incest, and this was back in 1968 when abortion was not legal, so I had no choice but to have that child. And I actually had planned on giving him up for adoption, but once I had him, I made the decision to keep him, and I ended up parenting for the last 40-odd years the child of my rapist. So people who don't understand how hard it is to make those decisions and to not have access actually haven't lived the story that I've had to live, and that's what made me so passionate about this issue, because a 14-year-old should have choices about what happens to her body when she's raped. And even though I kept my son, I really had a difficult parenting situation because you love your child, but you hate the circumstances. And speaking of a 14-year-old, I want to talk about what that law is going to do to Georgia. Last year, I had to do a clinic escort of a 14-year-old who came from Chicago, and she had been impregnated by her mother's boyfriend. So the mother and the daughter came to Atlanta because the child was 24 weeks. And the whole time, the 3 days I was with this little girl, she kept sucking her thumb. And I'll never forget that picture of a thumb-sucking child needing an abortion at 24 weeks and recognizing that this law now makes it impossible for us to help her. We really are being kicked back and kicked in the teeth by some insensitive people who don't care about, they can't protect our children from sexual assault, but at the same time they want to punish them through insensitivity.
Well, Loretta Ross, I want to go to a clip of Georgia Democratic State Representative Jazmyne Neil, who last month countered the so-called fetal pain bill with a measure that would have limited vasectomies. Let's play that clip.
This bill states that vasectomies can be performed to avert the death of a man or to avert serious risk or substantial or irreversible physical impairment of a major bodily function of the man. This bill mimics the abortion bills throughout the nation. And just like the abortion bills interfere with the woman's right to choose, it's only fair that the General Assembly debate the men's right to choose as well.
Your response, and did that debate occur?
Well, of course they did not want to have that debate, but my response to Jazmyne Neil is go for it. Because if they visited on men the same kind of sex discrimination that they're visiting on women, they would be able to see how unfair it is. I really do think that if they're going to call every little fertilized egg a human being and try to protect it, then we should count sperm too. And men should not be able to casually dispose of their little swimming little buggers, you know. And so I think across the country, whether it's the Lysistrata strategy where a Republican wife in Virginia refused to have sex with her husband, or trying to outlaw Viagra or require rectal exams before men can get it, all of these are illustrations by women legislators of what happens when medical decisions are not being made by human beings and their doctors, but are being made by legislators who don't have medical degrees. And it's just an illustration of how ridiculous this whole campaign and war against women really is, and why is it only visited on women? Why are not, in fact, we are raising up the question for why Viagra is covered by insurance but not birth control?
Finally, Loretta Ross, of course, we're in an election year. You mentioned the women who are raising this around the country, women legislators. We're very low when it comes to percentage of women legislators in comparison with many countries in the world. But the opening you see this year, I mean, what's happening in the state legislatures does not reflect what most people, men and women, feel around this country, actually, around issues like birth control. It's overwhelmingly for. Where do you see, how do you see this disparity closing between the laws and how people feel?
Well, you know, we have an old saying in the women's movement, when we're screwed, we multiply. And so I really think that they're going to feel the effects of that over the long term. They're, in fact, arousing their own backlash, where they have men and women who are outraged at this assault on contraception, which has been around for 50 years. And they are going to pay the price. I really do think that they are going to enjoy a brief moment in the sun, but we'll remember in November. We'll remember when they tried to cheapen our lives and our choices. And we're going to be joined by men and women, both Democrat and Republican and independent. And they really need to worry about their loss of
Loretta
independent
Ross, we're going to have to
votes.
leave it there. We thank you for being with us, National Coordinator of the SisterSong Reproductive Justice Collective. If you want a copy of today's show, go to our website at democracynow.org. We have a job opening, Development Director, check.